interest is in how practice can sustain the ephemeral I-thou relationship and keep open the channel of blessing. He is a Jewish family education fellow, a bar and bat mitzvah tutor, a founder of Remember Us, which was honored at this year's Yom HaShoah commemoration, and a retired Ner Shalom school director. We are always thrilled when Gesher is available to share his thoughts with us. I turn it to you, Gesher.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. So far, what a sweet evening so far. I'm still so full up from Rabbi's teaching, from Hannah's teaching. I feel very full already. And I hope that anything I have to say contributes to that if other people are feeling it too. So when I was first invited to offer something tonight, I said no for a couple of reasons. One is that I felt that I was so in conflict about what's going on in Israel and what I read in the Torah as the way to behave, right? And I just felt I couldn't talk about anything if I couldn't find some way to reconcile those things, which was of course an impossible task. And the other reason I said no is because I was raised to believe that if you're going to talk about the Torah, you had to be a Torah scholar. And it's still in my system somewhere that limitation from my youth that says, oh, only scholars are able to talk about the Torah. But I spoke with Rabbi Irwin about this, and he, of course, gave me a different frame entirely. He said, no, talk about your own personal relationship with Torah. And so that became the subject of my talk. And so this week, as I was preparing, I read a quote by a Jewish columnist in LA named David Suiza. And I'll read to you this quote. I think it's a wonderful way to begin. For a people that has made arguing an art and division a passion and dissidence a calling, how is it possible that after 3,300 years, we're all still reading from the same holy book? It's a question I just love, and it's a frame that I love. It's a frame of the bigger context of being Jewish. But it doesn't answer the question for me, how do I relate to Torah? And I have never actually asked that question before. And I was inspired to ask it by Reb Irwin's conversation. And more than that, I don't know anything about how the person sitting next to me relates to Torah. I don't know anything about how anybody relates to Torah, because it's a conversation that I've never had with anybody. And so this was an opportunity to do that, my own inquiry, and to inquire into my community about how people relate to Torah. And I found out that it's much more embedded in my experience, in the way I live, and it's much more complex than I had realized. So what I'd like to offer you tonight is four spaces that we'll go through. One is the context by which I understand Torah inside Judaism. My own process, which I offer not as a teaching of any sort, but just as, hey, this is how I relate to it. And whatever you find in there is useful, I'd be happy to know that. And then I interviewed a number of friends about their relationship to Torah and taped them, and the wonderful tech people, Roe and Sydney Norwitz, are going to edit that into something I can show you, so you get a sense of what other people feel about Torah. And then, not really a conclusion, but a summation about how significant I learned Torah was to what I think is the essence of Judaism. Of course, everybody knows that, but it's for a reason that I hadn't understood before. So 4 spaces, okay? The very first space I want to talk about is, just a moment. Cindy, I have to do something here, just a second. We didn't practice this, my friends, and so I have to get back to my notes, and I don't know how to do that with this on the screen. So I don't have to see this, but I guess you have to show it. Okay, thank you. Maybe that's not gonna work, but it's okay. It's okay if it doesn't work too. So context, first space, context in which I'm approaching this question of personal relationship to Torah.
Excuse me, Gesher, do you want me to show the slides?
If you can show it without covering up my own notes, yes.
I have no
Gesher, that's
control over
up
that.
to you. Yeah, Gesher, you can do that. Once
do I do that?
once Cindy shares it, then hit the escape button,
Okay,
and it'll stop being full after she does the share.
okay,
Hit
great.
escape, and then you'll be able to see how to move things around on your screen.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, the share is coming. I don't see it up on my screen, so maybe I'll just proceed.
Hang on one second. Let's get this up here. Cindy, we're not actually seeing it. It says that your screen.
It says it's paused. It did something.
okay.
I'm not sure what. Let me try again. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Aaron. I never knew how to do that. I hope this works.
Cindy, if you can't get it up, I can try.
Please. That's working. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much, Aaron, for that advice. So context, the first space, context. Franz Rogensweig was a 19th century Jewish philosopher who has a teaching that I find really useful, that Judaism is like an immense library or an archive or a warehouse or a repository. It's too big to engage in its totality. So what are we supposed to do? So his advice is that you wander aimlessly, and you wander aimlessly until you find something that calls to you, something that lights you up. And so this is a practice that I do it, I recommend, and I would recommend that tonight, that you keep that in mind. Just anything that comes up in this conversation that you find lights you up in some way or interesting, that's a clue to where your attention could go in the future. So I needed a metaphor to contain all this immensity of Judaism, and the one that I like is the metaphor of Judaism as a hologram. And I'll explain to you why. A photographic negative, you shine a light through it and you get a print. A holographic negative, you shine a laser light through it and you get a print. However, if you cut up a holographic negative and you just have a little piece of it and you shine the light through it, you still get the entire image. And the image is clearer where the light has hit the laser has hit the negative, but in fact, the whole image is there. And that, for me, is kind of exactly what's Judaism about. All of it is in any of it. Anything that you touch that's Jewish contains all of Judaism in it, and it's available to find. Do we have an example? We just finished this period now of counting the Omer. Counting the Omer is a great example where there's 7 Sefirot, the lower Sefirot, and we study what is loving kindness in strength, what is beauty in strength. Each Sephirah contains all the other Sefirot. So this is kind of a feature of Judaism, and it has a name. It's called inter-inclusivity. And the idea is that, as I say, any of it isn't all of it. The other way that I navigate this hologram is with a concept called granularity. And what I mean by that is, I wanted to understand for myself, have a way to frame the idea. How could Ein Sof, how could the nothingness of God, the absence of God, be in everything? And I just needed an idea, a way to hold that in my mind. And the idea of granularity is what occurs to me, is that things become, well, let's say up and down. There's not really an up and down I want to talk about, but as the energy descends, it becomes, in a sense, coarser. It becomes finally this world that we see, the embodied world. And as you go up, it seems to become more refined until finally we're told, to that place where it's so refined that there's nothing there except something that we call God. So inclusivity, inter-inclusivity, and granularity are my two frameworks for looking at Torah and looking at Judaism in general. So now let's move to another space. And I'll tell you what Torah is for me personally. The first thing is I'm moved by two ideas. That Torah is an ongoing conversation between God and humanity. It's a conversation that started at Sinai, and it continues today. And it doesn't continue kind of on the institutional level. It's a personal conversation that goes on between humanity individually and whatever the source is that we come from. And that for me, this Jewish practice is to be in that conversation. So that's one thing. It's an ongoing conversation. The other thing is I'm very interested in dreams, and it occurred to me recently that Torah is actually, I could say, kind of God's dream, or a dream that God had that we wrote down. And I look at the talking serpents and the donkeys and the pillars of fire and the angels and the bush dust doesn't burn and the copper snakes and on and on and on. It's dream content, it's dream material. And we're actually organizing a dream study group, a Torah dream study group. And if anybody's interested, you contact the office and let them know. We'll keep you informed about it. But so these two things, it's an ongoing conversation and a dream. Those two things are not necessarily different. It could be a conversation in a dream. But you get the idea. So I learned in this inquiry that Torah for me is a way to deal with ideas. So I'm primarily a thinking person as opposed to, let's say, feeling or sensation or intuition. I'm primarily a thinking person. And so this channel is the one that's available to me most easily. And so this is the one I gravitate toward. And so I'm interested in Torah for the ideas in it. The way the idea is organized for myself, I look when I look at my own experience, the experience of my own study, was that I think the Torah is it's an example of what can be studied through comparative mythologies. So some examples of that would be Jacob, who occurs in other cultures as a trickster figure, and we certainly have our trickster figure. The Lech Lecha portion is about the journey. It could be the hero's journey, the quest, but it has a certain shape all over world mythology. And this is our version. And Basha, tonight in her session that follows this, will be talking specifically about Lech Lecha. And so I just want to make point here that the mythological approach includes things that occur in cultures all over. There's another one that's very, very interesting to me, of the sacred twins, occurs in mythologies all over the world. And in these mythologies, very often, as in our mythological version, the second son is chosen, becomes the chosen one to be the lineage bearer. So it's something there about comparative mythology illuminates for me the stories of Torah. And remember, I'm talking now, just this is my own personal space. It's not talking about anything but that. The next thing is, that's up for me with looking at Torah, is exegesis, is that we have a system called Pardes that says that any story in Torah can be approached at multiple levels, and 4 levels here are defined as this acronym Pardes. Comes from the word Pashat, means the literal meaning, Remez, kind of the allegorical meaning, Darash, the homiletic value, and Sod is the mystical value. And I'm forgive me if I'm telling people things they already know, but this is one of the approaches, and this is a wonderful example for me of, again, inter-inclusivity, because you find in any one story all of these approaches included, and also granularity, because they can be studied at multiple worlds. I think people are probably familiar with the idea of the 4 worlds being the world, the embodied world, the Yetzirah, the world of formation, the emotional world, the intellectual world, and the world of union. So any story in Torah can be studied this way, from its inclusive nature and from its granular nature. So those are 2 frames that work for me very, very well. The next place that I came to in my own understanding of this had to do with my own personal ethics, which I had never taken the time to trace back to Torah, but when I started to look, clearly this is how I've been shaped as an ethical human being. And one of the ideas that's pop out for me, right transcends might. This is one of the things we're all struggling with now so much in the news. Right transcends might. Why is might transcending right now? So it's a problem, right? That we all have the opportunity to contribute to somehow the completing of the world work. That the world is a creation, an ongoing creation, in which we're having this dialogue with God. And the point of the dialogue is to somehow come to what it says at the end of the last prayer, I'm sorry, but it says, and on that day, God will be one, and God's name will be one. So that talks about, we say that in shul all the time. What we're talking about is the work will be completed. On that day, the work will be completed. Somehow, the Torah is pointing me toward how you contribute to that process of completing the world's work. Now, how does that do that? Well, there's not for me to say in any definitive way. I have no idea, but I hold it in this way, that the whole story, the flow of the whole story, for me, comes from creation to peoplehood, to nationhood, to the arising of shadow, and to the final integration of shadow into a communal experience. The 5 books, for me, kind of line up along that continuum. So, and the conclusion is that we're a people, and peoplehood is an inextricable part of our individual identities, which means that we're responsible for each other, for our survival and for our self-making and for our communal making and for all our ethical and our spiritual aspirations. So the second source is, the Torah is the source of my personal ethics. Again, in my space, in my own personal space, the third level is that it's this, and this is probably the part that's dearest to me, is that it's the source of my personal cosmology. How the universe works. A big question, how does the universe work? But we have an opinion about that. How does the universe work? And what's my place in it? How am I supposed to be inside that universe? What do I do? So, and this is the dearest part to me, and the part that's most, I think, influenced my thinking. So for me, I have a lot of experience in both life experience as both a Buddhist and a Jew. And Buddhism is known as a non-dual religion. There are not two, there's not a higher and lower, it's non-dual. You can't say it except in the negation. Buddhism is non-dual. For me, Judaism is also a non-dual religion. It's just dressed up in a very different cultural dressing. And how do I come by this conclusion? If you look at the very first letter of Torah, it appears to make that statement. The very first letter is the bet in Breshit. It's not the Aleph, which is the monad, which stands symbolically for God, the oneness of God. It begins with bet, Breshit. And so it says not one, but two. Second letter. We're no longer talking about unity, the unity of God. We're now talking about duality. Breshit. If you break that word, that Breshit, down into component parts, it could be God's first house is one of the elements of it. God has built his house. That which is one has built this house in which there's multiplicity. And if you even look at the shape of the bet, the part that's toward the Aleph is solid. And the part that's toward the rest of the Aleph bet is open. So it says you can't go back to the one. You have to go through the multiplicity to get back to the Aleph. You know, in mystical texts, you often see that the Aleph bet is written continuously. You go from Tav directly to Aleph, over and over again. The Aleph repeats. So one says this little letter, this little simple bet, is saying, no, you can't get back there. You have to go through multiplicity to return to the Aleph experience. There is a little stub at the bottom of the bet that kind of reaches back to the Aleph. And I take it that there are those souls who can maybe make that transition, but I don't know anything about that, but the letter seems to imply that it's possible to do that. And we know we come across great souls who've taught us and able to do that. But for me, it's the duality is the path toward Aleph, to get back to Aleph. So as you go through the stories seem to tell me something about how to, Cain and Abel's story, what is that about? Japanese songs, what is it about? The story seemed to say, listen, you're going to live in the world is going to mess with you, the world is going to challenge you, the world is going to disappoint you, the world is going to be resist you, the world is going to do all these things. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And somehow, through all that keep going, through the Korach story and through the laws of Leviticus, and somehow we wind up in Deuteronomy, in chapter 6, we wind up at the Shema. And the Shema for me is the reconciliation of what begins with the bet and Breshit. That is to say, here, you who are wrestling with this idea, that which we call God is this oneness. And the whole structure for me personally of Judaism is to remember that. The ritual life, the mitzvot, the whole structure is simply to say, listen, this is your path. The way knows the way, as that beautiful song said. This way knows the way. This is your path. Start with multiplicity. Stick to it. Get through it. And at the other end, there is the possibility of the approach to union. May not be in this, as a Buddhist and also as a Jew, I'd say, may not be in this lifetime. I was just reading about Jewish views of the afterlife and rebirth and reincarnation, which is more in the mystical literature than it is in our institutional practice. But it may not happen in this life. It may happen down the road somewhere. But the point is, you stick to the process because that's the best chance we have of not only living together, but living in union with God. And if you catch a glimpse of it in this life, God bless you. And if not, don't worry about it because your chances are multiple. All our chances are infinitely multiple. Okay, so that is my that's the second room for me. The first was context. The second was me and Torah, basically, my relationship to Torah. Now, there are, I think, complete my relationship to Torah. There are a lot of very hard parts. There are parts that I find extremely hard in Torah, and parts that I find extremely hard in the way the world operates when it's expected that it's going to operate in Torah, which is one of the things we're going through right now. The conflicts we have right now is, wait a minute, where is Torah in all this? Here, in this, what's going on now? Is it have somehow the Gazans become the Amalekites? I mean, is it this? That's madness in the 21st century, and yet there are people who make a case that this is the right thing to do. And as Rabbi says, you have to find the good in that. You have to find somehow the good in that. So that's the parts of living in the world with a consciousness of Torah, and somehow the world is not really demonstrating that that's going on. But within Torah itself, there are lots and lots of hard parts for me. I'll give you an example. It says in Torah, we're the chosen people. God has chosen us. I can't read it that way. I can read that we are chosen among the nations, which is kind of more the Reconstructionist point of view, but I have, for myself, made a different take on it. And you'll understand what that is, because that's what I've been saying. My take is that we're the choosing people. We're the people who choose to be in this conversation. So here's a hard part for me, and I get to digest it, reflect on it, and say, how do I live with this? And in this case, that's my point. I've taken that text that was difficult for me, and I've made it something that's kind of faithful to what's being said, but really has my own spin on it. We are the choosing people, and I choose to be one of the choosing people. I choose to be in that conversation. That makes it much more palatable for me, at the very least, palatable for me. Another hard bit is we talked about Esau earlier, everything having to do with Esau. I myself am a second son. My brother's birthright, not through God, I hope not, through my actions was denied him. So I read that story with great compassion for Esau. Now, Esau in the literature gets a bad rap. He's the other, he's the bad. I can't go there. I can't go there. He's the bad. I would rather go with Reb Nachman and find the good. Extol his virtues and ignore his blemishes and bless him. Because I have personal experience of what happens when a first son is overlooked. So that's a hard part for me. David, David is a very hard character for me. Our King David, our beloved King David, is a very hard character for me because he does some really nasty stuff. And the fact that he ultimately, through the help of the prophets, sees what he's done, that's great. But it's on that list of the very, of me. He's a hard character because I love the Psalms, I love the story of David, I love the, he's a fighter, he's a guerrilla fighter, he's an outlaw, he's all the things that appeal to me in different ways. And yet he behaves really, really badly. And one of the reasons I have trouble with it is because it puts me in mind of times I behaved really, really badly. So he's a difficult character for me. I have a very hard time with Pinchas. Pinchas, a zealot who kills a couple, as I recall the story, out of zealotry. So zealotry doesn't sit well with me. And here Pinchas is in the Bible as a zealot and somebody who to be emulated. So those are the hard bits. But overall, I can hang with it because I think the story is for my good, because it structures me ethically, it structures me cosmologically, if I could say, and it structures me intellectually. So it gives me a rich, rich life of engagement going through these different channels. Okay, so we're moving along a little bit. So as I said, I was interested to know what other people thought about the Torah and what their personal relationship with it. So I don't mean thought about what do they think about it. I mean, what was their personal relationship to it? And I interviewed a number of friends and found, well, you'll see a vast spectrum, a very large spectrum of personal relationships, which in itself is very informative, So I'm going to ask, please, that Cindy, if you could play that video. It's 8 minutes long, and you'll hear from our fellow congregants and other friends of mine about their reflections on the personal relationship to Torah.
Hi, my name is Elaine Leader, and I'm here to talk about my relationship to the Torah. I was brought up Orthodox, and so basically the Torah was to me inaccessible. It was in Hebrew. My family went to shul, but it was all in a language I couldn't understand. So it was a history of a people to me, and sometimes I considered it like Bobamises, grandma's tales, because I wasn't sure what was based in fact, what was history, what was, word of mouth, oral history. But about 2 years ago, I had joined Ner Shalom because I was looking for community after I had retired. And found wonderful people, and Erwin and his music and his drashes and the music of the Good Shabbos Band really grabbed me. I didn't see it much as Torah, it was community. But I joined the board because I'm a good citizen and I show up for whatever I participate in. And those of us who are on the board during Kol Nidre are asked to stand at the front of the congregation. And I was handed a Torah and I wept. I had never held a Torah in my life. I was not allowed to as an Orthodox Jewish girl. And it was really transformative, I would say, because at that moment, something broke inside of me and I thought, oh, what is this all about?
My relationship to the Torah in this time in my life is becoming softer. I used to not accept it because I don't like to accept things as is just because they're written. And I didn't want to accept things as written because they no longer serve me or us. And as time goes by, now I am more accepting to the tradition and the framework that our people have used for millennia at this point that allowed us to ask questions and to see the world through the lens of our tradition.
For 12 years, every Sunday, while my kids were in Hebrew school at Ner Shalom, we sat in a circle with Reb Irwin, and he told the kids a story having to do with the Parsha of the week. And I have to admit that at first I didn't quite get it, but over the course of the 12 years, hearing the stories again and again, I grew to understand the value of the discipline of going over it again and again and again. That Torah is the vehicle that allows us to connect. Torah requires us to go deeper, and it requires that we have the discipline to keep going. I also want to say a lot of what it says is awful, but that doesn't bother me anymore because I see the beauty in the relationships and connections that it has offered me.
I know that whenever I am in the presence of an open Torah, it's a very big energy. So I feel like the Torah has a kind of an aliveness in its physicality that I feel energetically. And in terms of studying the words or understanding the stories, I almost embrace it more as the black and white of the letters, the incredible mystery of my understanding is more about the mystery of what is Torah and what is meant, what is being said, and receiving it more as a transmission through the letters.
So for me, it all begins with love, with the love of God that was imbued into Adam. Adam being all people together, everyone who's alive, everyone who ever lived, everyone who has lived, with the Tselem of Elohim, the essence, the DNA of God, and that's the source. And the rest of it is the unfolding story of our people. The unfolding story of our people with our understanding of God changing and being transmitted. And the Torah is both the written Torah and the living Torah. And I really relate to the living Torah. And the written Torah becomes a reference point for learning and discussion. And for me, the important thing is to always remember, to bring to the forefront of my thinking that the Torah is being written today, that we are part of the living Torah. And the Torah is the Torah of our people, the story of our people. And right now, it's the time of the unification of the stories of all peoples, while we stay distinctly in the world of the Torah.
I
have had not many relationships with the Torah in the past, and most of my relationships have been around my bar mitzvah, and I've not seen the Torah many times before this. I know that there's a lot of work that goes into making the Torah. It is written by hand and it is written on deerskin, and if you mess up, you have to restart the whole page, which takes a lot of time. And the reason I am a lot of times kind of nervous when I'm around the Torah or reading from the Torah is because I know how much work goes into this, and it can't be messed up. I hope that in the future I can be around the Torah more than I know that a lot of people after their bar mitzvahs don't have that's the deepest connection with Judaism and the Torah that they have. Most of a lot of people in their lives around their bar mitzvahs, and I hope that it's not like that for me, and I can have a deeper relationship with the Torah after as I grow up, and I hope I just have more opportunities to be around the Torah. A lot of times a main thing I really think about when I think about the Torah is just how a lot of people really just, it's just a really important thing to a lot of people. And it definitely, to me, it's just important, and so much, it's just it's a artifact that so much work goes into making, and it just has so much, it has the history of everything before us and all that, making it just so sacred.
So back, can I be heard? Yeah, great, thank you. So I was so moved that anybody I asked this question to wanted to engage the question. And that was very interesting to me because I had never thought to ask the question myself before. And yet when the question is so much there as a luminous object, as an object of reverence and awe and everything, but I've never considered how do you relate to it? And so these people are really great. I'm grateful for their willingness to be recorded and to share with us all these different approaches that people take to try to come to grips with the relationship with this object that somehow we all find significant. So thanks to them. So, okay, so we've talked about context. We talked about my Torah. We've talked about other people's personal Torah. I'd like to offer you a kind of a summation of this. It's not a conclusion by any means, but just a summary. I recently was introduced to ideas in a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And it's a book about how education is done in underserved and marginalized communities, and also in middle-class communities, and maybe even in privileged communities. And the author talks about something called the banker's model, which is that the student is an empty box, and the teacher is pouring wisdom into the box. The banker's model. One of the geniuses of Judaism is that we won't allow ourselves to be told what the Torah is and what we should think about it. Freedom is the founding myth of Judaism. Egypt and the Sinai experience are the founding myth of Judaism, the story of freedom. when we're told this is what we should think, this is, in a sense, the resumption of the slave state. You lose the right to engage it on your own. You're told what to think. Instead, for 33 centuries, we've entered into dialogue with it. And the dialogue itself, not the conclusions, not the content, not anything having to do with what you think or I think, the dialogue itself is the expression of the state of liberation. And that's an amazing, essential element of being Jewish. Conversation is not a technique, it's not a practice, but it's a way of being in the world. We're told this is how you be in the world. And it depends on mutuality, it depends on exploration of experiences, exploration of ideas. It's inherently social, and it expresses our humanity, and it expresses our freedom, and it's at the essence of Judaism, as far as I'm concerned. So this engagement with Torah as a process, without any conclusions being reached, is what it means to be Jewish to me. So I see we have a bit of time left. That's what I wanted to share with you, and I'm really happy to hear anything anybody would like to contribute to this conversation by way of dialogue. I'm going to open up the window. I'm not sure how to do that. So I can't seem to manage to open up my own. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So, Rita, would you care to say something?
Yes, I would, but somebody else was waving their hands. Maybe that was just our silent clapping for you. Thank you so much. What a beautiful, personal, but somehow also wide teaching you gave. Thank you so much. I would like to say, I won't talk too long. One thing that really helps me a lot when I'm struggling with my own folly and foibles or somebody else's is to remember that, oh, this is the human condition and we weren't born with an instruction book. I'd like to believe that the Torah is an instruction book. Some people believe that the AA Big Book is an instruction book. The only instruction book my parents had was Dr. Benjamin Spock's Baby and Child Care. And anyway, joke. But I see the Torah as a collection of very rich imagery and prompts for thought, for poetry, for stories, for astonishment. And I learned that by writing a prose poem in response to each of the 54 Torah portions.
No.
But which is found deep in the Ner Shalom website somewhere. But I love what Shari said about revisiting it. I mean, as soon as we get to the end, the beginning starts without hesitation. And so, reading and rereading, reading from different angles, reading at different depths for different reasons. It's a pretty magical, sacred text.
I'll look for your 54 poems.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I will look for your 54 poems.
Yeah, maybe Shari can help provide some sort of link to it. It's sort of deep in the techno code of the whatever.
I'll put a link in a moment. I'll put a link in a moment.
I think many people here know Rabbi Elisheva,
Yeah.
who served in the congregation for a while. And she did an interesting thing. She wrote haiku for all 613 commandments. It's just a way to systematically dig deeply into it.
Gesher, as you were speaking, I thought of the physicality of the Torah scroll and it being the sacred essence of a community.
Hmm.
And the way in which we hold the community of Sobislav in the Czech Republic. Our Torah scroll holds our community. And as each person comes up to read from it, they become a part of that ongoing unfolding.
Beautiful, Barbara. I have somewhat a similar feeling about it being representative of Zion, not of the state of Israel, but of somehow it's a piece of Zion that I'm standing right next to, so, I do a lot of tutoring, and when I tutor, I feel like we're revisiting Zion in the physicality of the words, that it's right here, spread out over the world. So it's somewhat analogous to what you're saying. There's a locality to it that's actually, for me, inherent in the scroll itself, that somehow represents Judaism. So,
Gesher, I
yes.
want to follow on this is Stephanie. I want to follow on what Barbara said. At the women's retreat a couple of years ago, I read from the Sobislav Torah, and I had a visceral experience of their voices speaking through that Torah and through my chanting.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's a really powerful thing about Torah. No matter what we ascribe to it, it's our history, and it has been chanted for centuries. And that there's power in that, there's energy in that, and there's just so much, there's so much of our history in that.
It's very beautiful. And, and I just want to say, I want to comment on that I think it's wonderful that you had a luminous experience of the spirituality of it, and that it was a channel for you in that regard. And in kind of new age, the new way, I don't think you're doing this, Stephanie, but in kind of new age thinking, somehow the spiritual often seems to take precedence of place over the material. And I think that's unfortunate. I think the luminous is one version of God acting in the world, not different than an apple. So I'm delighted that you had that experience. I've had not that experience, but luminous feelings. But it's important for me to say that that's a level. And in the sense of granularity, the level is continuous from the grossest to the most ineffable. And if you land in that level of the spiritual and the luminous, God bless you, and you're very fortunate. But not different than that person who relates to the world as God's stuff.
Gesher, I'd
Yes.
just like to comment, and thank you so much. This was magnificent. I think the chief way that I have perceived the Torah is that I assume it has gone through many iterations over thousands of years, translations. I assume, and I could be wrong, that at some point rabbis said, we'll take that out. No, we'll keep this in. And that, so those stories, every one of those stories, I think, are clues for how to behave and what we can find in the magnificence of the world and in the dirt of the world. I think that this highly examined, beautiful work contains clues that as a people and as individuals, we can use if we just choose to pay attention to those stories and to the specific way in which they are told.
And isn't that a wonderful adventure to go looking for those clues?
Yeah. Thank you, Gesher.
Gesher, thank you so much for this beautiful session. I think I want to bring it back to something you said at the beginning that you talked to me about a couple weeks ago, about seeing Torah as a dream, as a collective dream, because it is true that there have been many editors. There are pieces of Torah that have political agendas relating to kingdoms 2,500 years ago that are utterly invisible to us now. But if we hold the Torah as our collective dream, and approach it that way, we're going to be able to find the meaning for us. We're going to be able to find how it's divinatory. We're going to be able to find how it points to places we're at in our lives and where we need to go. It's going to keep offering us sustenance over and over, and not because it's divine and not because it's historical, but because it's our shared dream. And it's really about us. It's about
Very
us
beautiful.
in this. So
Very beautiful.
thank you.
Thank you.
It's beautiful teaching, Gesher. It's always a pleasure to be sitting at your feet and receiving your wisdom.
Thank you, Ray.
Yeah.
I